What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the fourth album by Nelly. Basically, this project is called Suit, and it came out in the late summer of 2004. The thing about this particular album is it's a double album. Basically, Nelly's third album is called Sweat, which I reviewed the compilation album of the amalgamation of these two albums, which was called Sweatsuit, which came out in 2005 and had the hit single Grills, which had the hit single Grills on there with Paul Wall and Ali and Gipp and some of those type folks as far as that particular thing kind of went. And I would have to say that was a pretty rave particular project. Liked a lot of the good amalgamation of those particular songs, but I would have to say initially I said back in November that I thought that Sweat was probably the better buy, at least in terms of like the quality between the two albums. And I do think this is a pretty quality album, but I would pretty much recommend that minus like maybe one or two songs off of this particular album that are not on Sweatsuit. I would almost say that Sweatsuit might be the better buy than just the individual Sweat and Suit as far as I kind of went. Now with Sweat, the definite better buy would be Sweatsuit, just based upon the concept that there are some hit missing songs off of that particular one. But I would have to say, at least with Suit, you get the singles on here, and it's just I mean, when comparing Sweat to Suit and some of these type ones, I would have to say that Suit is probably the better album, but it's also a little bit more mature and it's a little bit more like stationed and cultivated as far as I kind of have. It's just kind of the concept. It's just a lot more of a suave type project, not quite as crazy or as riveting as like Sweat is with songs like Flap Your Wings and some of those type ones and Heart of a Champion and some of those particular type songs. There's some other ones on Sweat that do a lot of riveting energy. Na 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 is another one like that, but this kind of has the pitch that this is just a lot more laid back, kind of more sophisticated suaveness from Nelly as far as I kind of have. It's a good pitch to kind of have both these angles, but really the true the true centerpiece of the situation would be to get Sweatsuit and then the Sweatsuit album from 2005, all of which have some hit songs on here. But I'd have to say this is probably like a notch just beneath Sweatsuit in terms of overall quality, just because it just doesn't. I mean, it has a couple it does on this particular album, but it's not to say it's bad in any sense. It's definitely going to get a relatively high score, I'd have to say. So it's just kind of the concept. So it's just kind of the concept of this being a hit Nelly album, pretty much on par with Nellyville, and it's basically the concept of this being a quality album, pretty much on par with Nellyville and Country Grammar and some of those type ones, and probably even like the Saint Lunatics album from 2001. I'd have to say Nelly had a pretty string of good albums just between 2000 and 2005, up to about Sweatsuit. I'd have to say, so that was like his prime years. But this is completely Nelly in his prime. Between the three singles off of Suit and the three singles off of Sweat, he particularly had six singles just off of this double album, and all of these, for the most part, minus like the last two singles on each of Sweat and Suit, all of these singles really charted pretty heavily. Like My Place and Over really charted quite high for Nelly back in the time. These were some of his biggest hits back in those days. And he also did a pretty good job with the Sweat album with Flap Your Wings and some of those type ones. And I think Tilt Your Head Back and some of those particular type ones. But this ultimately Suit was the higher charting album. This is the one that outsold and outcharted Sweat, I would have to say, but it's just you still want to get Sweat for the ferocious energy, I'd have to say. But we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. So the first single is My Place, and this has Jaheim on the hook. This is a definite hit, I'd have to say. This is a definite hit, I'd have to say. This is a butter smooth kind of ladies mingle of a bop, I would have to suppose. Just a summer The song is just a summer stretcher, and it just has a great hook, like I was saying. Great Jaheim hook. Not too many folks fuck with him in terms of getting hooks from him. Not too many folks fuck with Jaheim in terms of getting hooks from him, as far as that kind of happens. But this is like a vintage kind of 2000s era Nelly, I'd have to say, and it's very Dilemma-like. If you like the song Dilemma off of Nellyville with Kelly Rowland and some of that type pitch, this is like almost like a sequel to that particular song. Has the same kind of aesthetic and theme as far as that kind of particularly kind of happens. It's a real smooth kind of summer stretcher that just does a lot of damage. It's charted extremely high, and this is one of Nelly's best hits, apart from like Ride With Me and Hot in Here and some of those type ones. But it's definitely a pretty high charting one. It's a top 30 single, so it's definitely this vintage 2000s fare from Nelly that just hit really heavily, and it was just a great one. So that's kind of the thing. The second single and follow-up single that also did a lot of damage off this album is Over and Over. And this was another good highlight that lasted throughout the late summer and early fall as far as that kind of happens. This one just kind of carried some units as far as selling Suit just within that pitch, I'd have to say. This is like a hazy kind of summer evening after hours gem, I would definitely feel like. It's got a great the song has a great Tim McGraw kind of cameo, I'd have to say. And it's just a lazy kind of summer heat stretcher, I'd have to suppose. So this is just a real nice one. Both of these singles, both My Place and Over, are two great summer stretching type songs that just have a lot of pizzazz and its overall appeal, I would have to say. I mean, they're both kind of lazier just in the pitch, and they just kind of feel like summer. Like when I say summer stretcher, when you think of songs like Dilemma back in those days that just lasted all throughout summer, just a good pitch to kind of have for like some just standard fun as far as that kind of happens. These are just some other songs that were kind of like the sequels to those particular type songs. Songs like Ride With Me, songs like Dilemma, some of those type pitches. I want to say that Nelly had some other lady songs around that time. I just can't think of them at this particular time, but definitely I would definitely say that Nelly was getting pretty familiar with these like summer vibes that he was getting across the early 2000s. It's just a good pitch to kind of get that. The third single, "And They Say," was a pretty surprise hit from Nelly as far as that kind of went. It was kind of an offhanded single, but it still worked as a pretty good pitch to kind of get. This one charted in the winter of 2005. This one didn't do quite as much damage as the first two singles, but it was still a pretty nice kind of one to kind of get. It's just another kind of boppish type one that's kind of an offhanded kind of song from Nelly to kind of remember and this kind of thing. It's kind of like Eminem's kind of Superman or something like that, or Eminem's like Sing for the Moment, some of those type pitches. That was just kind of like a late single from Nelly that kind of went as far as I kind of have. So that's a good one. It's kind of a drizzling day commerce gem, I'd have to say. It's just a nice, balmy surprise single from Nelly, I'd definitely have to suppose. And it's just a good makeshift out and about kind of hit. So I definitely like this one. Real laid back. This one's not as much of a ladies song. It's just kind of a more day commerce type tune, I'd have to say. This car and They Say it's just kind of lazy car commerce as far as that pitch kind of happens, especially on like a rainy day, something like that. Just kind of a summer type tune that just has, I mean, it can be a summer type tune, but this spring, summer, fall type tune is something in like the kind of rainy type weather, just for like a more kind of overcast kind of day almost, just within that pitch of just being a little bit of a drizzling type feel, but still kind of having like some of that summer balmy kind of energy. It's just a real kind of balmy type song. I definitely had to suppose just a real nice one to kind of get within that kind of pitch. Like I was saying, it's a pretty surprise hit single from Nelly. It's another good hit to kind of get from him. It's not quite as energetic or quite as butter smooth as like the first two singles are, but it's just another nice one to kind of have. That's basically the concept about this album in terms of singles. So this album is shorter than Sweat. It only has 11 songs compared to Sweat's 13, but I'll go ahead and recommend the 8 songs out of 11 I recommend. So that's actually pretty pitch, I'd have to say. It's going to get a relatively high score, but we'll go ahead and talk about that. So the 8 songs I recommend would be My Place, Over and Over, And They Say, Play It Off, Paradise, She Don't Know My Name, Pretty Toes, and Nobody Knows. Basically, one of the best songs on this particular album is Play It Off, I'd have to say. This is like a suave, kind of sizzling, up-tempo lady snazz of a song, I definitely would have to say. It's got a great Pharrell hook, I'd have to feel like, and it's just a sublime kind of evening times and fun type song, I would definitely say. So it's just the concept of this particular one. This is one of the most jazzy and kind of ritzy type songs on this particular album. It's a real nice, suave, breath of fresh air as far as it kind of happens. It's a real nice pitch to kind of get. You look suited up, that type of stuff, suited and booted, some of that type of stuff. Just really looking snazzy and that sort of pitch. It's a real nice kind of suave type one to have for the ladies as far as that kind of goes. Basically, I like a more pizzazz of a single compared to My Place, where My Place is more of like a hangout type song. It's the same thing with Over and Over. That's a more malaise one like Usher's Confessions or something like that. I kind of feel like Play It Off is a little bit more ritzy, kind of almost like a dance song. This has a lot of snazz about it and just overall pizzazz. It's a pretty good one to kind of get. Paradise is another highlight. This is like a breezy kind of vacay type pizzazz of a song, I'd have to say. It's just an easy summer relaxer and a comfy hit vibe that it particularly has. It's just a comfy hit vibe that this song particularly kind of has. It's a ladies bop and it's just smooth and melodic, I'd have to say. So this is a nice one. This really feels like a pretty breezy parrot, like the song says, Paradise. It's a real paradise. It's a real paradise-like type tune to have. Just perfect for going on a vacation, vacay type stuff. Summer, June, July, August, something to that pitch. Going to Hawaii, going to Barbados, going to some of those type places, going to the Caribbean, something like that to kind of have. I mean, even just going to a place where there's a beach and an ocean, I'd have to say it's just a good relative pitch. It's just a good pitch to get on that relative tip as far as that kind of happens. It's just a real nice one. Another ladies hit that works pretty damn well. This one's pretty much like a pretty high mid-tempo kind of job, I'd have to say. And on top of that, it's just a real nice one. She Don't Know My Name's a pretty highlighted hit also. This is like a jazzy She Don't Know My Name is like a jazzy kind of stepping out fun of a song, I'd have to say. It's a ritzy kind of outing and relative promo jive that this song particularly kind of has, and it's just an energetic kind of catchy hit. So this is another kind of jazzy type one, kind of similar to Play It Off. Both of these have a lot of ritziness and pizzazz about them that just have a lot of flash and overall night appeal. This one kind of feels more of like a promo song, I'd have to say. This one's a little bit more of like date night kind of outing type stuff, just a little bit more snazzed up. I mean, Play It Off is definitely a suave one, but that's a little bit more of kind of like a more festive type one. I'd say that She Don't Know My Name's a little bit more kind of composed and more promo like, I'd have to suppose. This definite ritzy song, but these are just some real nice ones. Snoop Dogg did real great on here, and I like Ron Isley. Ron Isley did excellent on this particular song. This is just a real good pitch. I like the Nelly and Ron Isley kind of team ups because a lot of these hit pretty heavily. He teamed up with Nelly on his 2003 mixtape or 2003 remix album, The Dirty Versions. That's a pretty excellent song. So he's had some good songs with Nelly. Snoop Dogg does a great job on here. It's just no real good pitch. Pretty Toes is another nice one. This has T.I. on there. I'd have to say this is a definite nice hit as far as I can have. This is like some nice, similar, breezy summer hit Pretty Toes is like a nice, similar, breezy summer hit to Let's Get Away by T.I., I'd have to suppose. It's produced by Jazzy Faye, I'd have to say. So this is like a sprawling and kind of smooth jive that this song particularly kind of has, and it's just radio ready, I'd have to suppose. So this is just an overall highlighted one, definitely within that pitch as far as I kind of have. And it's just real excellent kind of fare as far as that would kind of go. Really like the butter smooth kind of vocals of this particular one. And like I was saying, if you like Let's Get Away by T.I., just the smooth type vocals of that particular song and the overall snazzy kind of appeal of it, this is another one that's just like basically a summer stretcher, a little bit more of a jazzy type of feel. It's kind of like in between type song between My Place and Play It Off as far as that kind of happens. Doesn't quite have the sheer Pretty Toes doesn't quite have the sheer bounce and pizzazz to Play It Off, but it's also not quite as much of like a hangout song as My Place, I'd have to say. It's just kind of like a low mid tempo kind of relative mid. Pretty Toes is like a relative mid tempo type hit to get for the ladies as far as that kind of happens for like some summer stretching kind of energy, I'd have to suppose. So that's a nice one. And then Nobody Knows is another highlight off this album. This is like a sunny, kind of lazy morning slash evening makeshift of a song, I'd have to say. It can be played in the morning or the evening. I saw it kind of either way, and like the pitch of how this appeal this particular song kind of has. It can be morning makeshift, evening makeshift. It just kind of works for that kind of balmy type feel as far as it kind of happens. It's got similar commerce vibe to End Day Say, I would have to say, and it's a kind of affable song, I'd have to suppose. So it's nice to get some of these songs from Nelly that are not quite as jazzy all the time and just kind of have like a more kind of commerce type pitch as far as it kind of happens just for some car commerce and overall makeshift just within the pitch of having some of that's just a good kind of after effect to kind of have on this particular album. It's something I didn't notice in the past back when this album first came out 20 years ago, but I do like the concept of getting some of these just kind of the breezy kind of after effect of just like some summer kind of malaise type feelings for some makeshift commerce as far as it kind of happens. Just some good ones. This one, like I was saying, is similar to End Day Say. Not quite as drizzling, not quite as rainy, but just Nobody Knows is not quite as drizzling, not quite as rainy, but within the same pitch as far as that commerce kind of feels, just within that pitch of kind of getting that. So it's a good concept. But to talk about some of the songs I don't recommend on here, there's not many songs I don't recommend, but it just would be a basic kind of it would just be a few basic blunders off this particular project, I'd have to say. I was kind of disappointed by the song In My Life with Avery Storm and Mace. Normally Avery Storm and Nelly team-ups are pretty good. Like the one on Sweatsuit from 2005 was a lot better than this one. This one was just kind of a clumsy type beat. In My Life was just kind of a clumsy type beat that just didn't really have like the affable kind of pitch of the rest of the sound. It just kind of felt like a real dud compared to like the rest of the energy. Just wasn't suave, wasn't that much of a pizzazz. Didn't really have the compelling energy that it needed. This really was one of the worst beats on the album, I'd have to say. Wood Grain and Leather with the Hole was kind of a funny song at the beginning. Nelly kind of doing some skit type vibes, but it just didn't really have the hit potential as far as that kind of went. It was just trying to be like a car cruiser, but just didn't pull it off that well. The beat production and the verses was just not that affable in terms of the pitch that it needed. And then Die For You was just kind of like a more homely type song. I think that one was made. And then Die For You was kind of like a more homely type song. This one was kind of a wrenching type song, but I just didn't vibe with it as much. I'd have to say it's just kind of the pitch. It was just differential from the rest of the vibe of the album. I'd have to say it was not like it's not like it's a necessarily horrible song, but it just didn't see how many times I would listen to it. And the standard pitch was just kind of a more wrenching type song than what was probably Die For You is more of a wrenching type song from this particular album, more so than what I would have wanted. So that's the particular pitch about this album. But this album's pretty quality in terms of the sheer hits that it has. So I'd have to say me recommending 8 songs out of 11. So I'd have to say me recommending 8 songs out of 11 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like an 8.25 out of 10. I feel like it's overall stellar and has a lot of good sheer and kind of smooth quality that it has. Pretty blockade of hits, I'd have to suppose. A good 3 hit singles, a lot of variety and like the smoothness and suaveness and just overall affable vibes for the ladies as far as that pitch kind of having some paradise type songs, some summery type malaise, just some summer makeshifts, some stuff like that. Just the overall pitch kind of having this like summer, just like July, August, September, third quarter of the year, some of that type pitch just for the warmer weather and kind of more early fall type stuff, just kind of having with that sort of suaveness and overall type vibe. So it's just some good kind of candid type outing type fare just for like the ritzy kind of stepping out type appeal, I'd have to say. The ritzy just stepping out appeal, I'd have to say. So the social score, though, I'm going to give like a 9.5. The social score of this album, though, I'm going to give a 9.5 out of 10 because this is pretty much the whole album damn near is pretty good for outing vibes. I'd have to say it's a great album for the ladies. This album is a great album for the ladies. It's just a real smooth one. It's hooky. It's melodic. It has chart appeal. It has commercial vibes that just have a lot of carried energy. I just would have to say it's a great song to kind of get crunk to and stuff like that. Just some good suave type vibes. Kind of a miniature dance album in some senses, I have to say. Some makeshift on there. Some overall pizzazz that works and it just hits pretty heavily. There's tons of good things to have for some hit vibes that just overall work and just like the crest of like a ritzy kind of outing life and just suaveness. And when you're suited up and things like that, or just overall suave type date night appeals and just overall things like that. I have to say, so 9.5 social. In terms of the future, like Nelly dropped an album in 2021. I think he put out like a remix album or something like that in 2022 or even 2023. He's dropped some recent projects. I'd have to say we're going to get to some more of these that have to suppose. Definitely going to review Sweat soon enough. As far as that kind of happens, we'll get to some more of these. But I'd have to say this is pretty much this is definitely a pretty bolstered album. I'd have to suppose. I would definitely recommend getting all three of these: Sweat, Suit, and Sweatsuit. I'd have to say, but this is definitely a pretty suave. This is definitely a pretty suave and smooth album. So yeah.